Welcome to the Spaghetti Wall podcast, where we dive into life.
Both the messy parts and the moments of joy, and everything in between. I'm Jason Wilcox, licensed clinical social worker.
And I'm Dr. Saelee, a licensed clinical psychologist.
So today we're going to be talking about something that couples really don't discuss before combining household or living together or getting married. And it's often something that couples fight about afterwards, or often it is money. Specifically, do we have joint bank accounts? I think traditionally people just put their monies together and things go to bills and payments. In the past, it used to be a one income household where the man is bringing in the money, the breadwinner, and the woman is at home caring for the kids and supporting in household things. And so now, though, in 2026, things have changed quite a bit. We have dual income household. We have the female sometimes is the higher earner in the home. And so things have really gotten shaken up.
It's interesting because probably the top three things I hear people arguing about in relationships is communication, sex, and finances. And so it's an important topic to really talk about, even though it's not as exciting as maybe sex, but it's really critical to understand how your finances work. Do you guys have a balance, a way for both of you to feel good about it? Or is it someone controls it and someone doesn't get to have any say in it?
I think talking about money can be sexy when you feel financially secure and can feel financially maybe independent or have autonomy around money. That feels sexy to me, Jason.
So yeah, finances. Where's the stuck points for couples normally?
One partner feeling like they don't have control of the money, especially if they're the ones that's the lower earner or the one that's not bringing in income. I think that brings up a lot of tension and insecurity.
Yeah, I think the other one I hear as well is someone that has spending habits that the other doesn't agree with. So yeah, those are the main two I hear is one has control, the other doesn't, or one is overspending and the other doesn't like that. So they don't agree about how to spend the money. The other one I've heard of is when a couple tries to split up the money, but it's done in a way that's based where it doesn't feel fair. In other words, like someone makes $100,000 a year and the other person makes $40,000 a year. And so the one that's making more decides that they get more of the money because they make more of the money.
I think the last one would be for blended families. I have a lot of individuals who they may have children going into a relationship or a marriage, or they don't have children and the other partner does. And what percentage of bills are they responsible for? What percentage of things like a care for the children who is not biologically theirs? That's come up. And also like how percentages and how bills are split. Like, okay, so if you earn more than me, should you pay 55% of the bills and I do 45% of the bill? I had a relationship where he was willing to pay 60% of our rent because he made a lot more money than I was making, and vice versa. There's some relationship where the percentage can be different. It doesn't necessarily have to be 50-50. So looking at blended families and income, who's making more, and splitting the bills right down the middle or maybe not right down the middle.
Yeah. So these are things that you definitely want to talk about beforehand when you're going into a relationship. But if you're already in a relationship, you might find yourself already having these problems and struggles and not figuring out what to do about it.
These problems will come up guaranteed, and a big percentage of couples do not talk about these things beforehand.
No, they don't. So pros and cons. I saw an article in the news not too long ago where the article actually promoted and pushed joint accounts.
No, separate account.
Accounts,
Oh, okay.
which was really interesting to me because me personally, I normally suggest people look at separate accounts with one joint account for the bills. But it was interesting because the article, it felt very biased for like the banking industry or something, like it impacts banks is what it felt like. So it didn't feel like it was very advantageous advantageous to couples versus banks, but that's my opinion of it, because joint accounts can work really, really great for some couples, and it can be extremely problematic for others. My parents, they had joint accounts. As far as I can tell, it worked great for them, right? My dad was the breadwinner for almost all my life. My mom did work some, but basically they just kind of figured out how to manage the money collectively and how to compromise on things and make the budget work. And on the flip side, I try to do the same because that's what I was taught with my first wife, my ex, and that went horrible. It was a terrible experience. She loved to spend the money, so we were always broke and in debt, and it did not go well at all. And so that taught me a huge lesson, and that's why I'm cautious ever promoting a joint account, because it can cause so many problems and arguments and fights versus separate accounts.
Yeah, I grew up where my mom and my dad had separate accounts. They never had a joint account. My dad was a breadwinner, so he pretty much would provide funds to my mom whenever we needed to pay bills or rent or things like that. But this left my mom feeling very, unstable with finances because she stayed home and she didn't work. And so she had very little autonomy. However, though, as things progressed, she was able to find some work and start making her own money. And I saw the independence that they both had around it. They rarely fight about money. And then, so growing up in all my relationships, I've never really shared an account with any of my partners or people I was cohabitating with. And in our marriage now, we don't share, well, we share a bills account which we contribute to, but then we have separate accounts for our own money.
Yeah, and it works extremely well for us. I mean, compared to what I went through in my last relationship to this one, it's been pretty pleasant, because what we do is we have our own individual accounts where we keep the excess of money, and then our joint account, everything that needs to cover bills goes into the bills account, and we came to an agreement on what percentages
Hmm.
each of us pay towards those bills, and it works pretty smooth. That money goes in, takes care of bills, and the rest we keep in our own individual accounts to spend any way we want.
I mean, I feel like I have full control over my money. I feel I have full control over things that we choose to share and purchase, like the kids' cars, big items like a tractor or a trailer, things like that. Like it just feels good to have autonomy and control for my money.
And there, I just bought a rowing machine that's going to be arriving Monday, and it's something I wanted, and I just went and got it.
Hmm.
If I wanted to sit down and talk to you about it and see if you want to share, we could have, and I didn't have to. I could do what I want. I still remember at the very beginning of our relationship, you had bought this painting. Or no, not a painting. It was a string art.
Yeah, it was wax yarn art.
Yeah. And I remember you bringing it back, and you spent $1,000 on it, I believe.
Hmm.
And you were like so worried I was going to be upset that you spent that kind of money. And I remember having that conversation, and I was like, it's your money. You spend it any way you want to spend, because it's not my money.
Well, that's the great thing about you, Jason, is that not only did you allow me autonomy in choosing that, you would remind me, like, it's okay, you get to make your own decisions. Where previously, even though I didn't have a joint account and even though I wasn't spending, my ex fiance's money, he would judge me for it, like, quite badly. And so I didn't have that with you, but that's where that behavior came from, where I felt like I was going to have some retaliation from you because I spent this money.
Yeah. And, I came from a relationship where that would have been the case too. I couldn't just go spend money, but ours was a little different because we had the joint account and we didn't. Yeah. So it was more difficult, but it was a great moment, I think, for both of us just to recognize the benefits of having the separate accounts is you have freedom. And I think that's the point also for those that are kind of taking note of what they want to do if they're struggling with finances. Tan brings up a great point that if you do separate out finances where, you guys have your separate accounts, it is important that person has full autonomy to spend the money the way they want to spend the money. That's their money. They get to do what they want as long as the joint needs of the home, the bills and groceries and everything is paid for. It's their money. They got to go do what they want.
Right. So watch that inner critic. Watch the judgments that comes up when you see your partner spending their money on things they want and you may not agree on it.
So let's kind of back up for a moment. Let's start with the joint accounts. If that's something you choose in your relationship, the cons is everything has to be negotiated, or one person has to control it while the other one has to be in total agreement that they control the money. It's the only way it works with joint accounts. So if you're going to make...
You mean we can't have a free-for-all, Jason? Like we both have access to the joint account and we spend leisurely as we like?
Well, I mean, you got to figure out how to budget and work through that. So joint account cons is those things. Pros, it is all in one account. Everybody gets to see it. Everybody gets to be a part for the most part, unless someone controls it. But this is why when I talk to clients about finances, I don't recommend this one because there's just so many steep cons and autonomy starts getting pushed on. Someone normally has to control something. And what we often talk about in relationships is trying to get away from any control in a relationship to find a balance in a partnership. It's just really critical learning how to negotiate, compromise, and talk about it. The other model that we've been talking about that Tan and I do is having separate accounts with shared bills. And that can be where you have a joint account like we do and all of our bills come out of that account, or you guys just split up the bills and pay them separately. Again, this is the one I recommend just because it gives as much autonomy as possible and nobody's controlling each other's money. Now, this one gets a little complicated when it comes down to someone's making more money than the other person, though. So if you're married and or in a partnership and you want to have it more balanced, you might have to look at what that looks like. Or if one partner's not working and taking care of the kids at home, and only one person is bringing in the money. This is something that you're going to have to figure out. How does that work? How does that balance out?
A mother or father could be working part-time, and then the other time they're caring for the kids, picking them up, dropping them off at school events and things like that. So we do have what I would call blended income where, there's dual income, but one person might be working less hours, get paid less, and so they're bringing in less for many reasons. I have friends who are both, like the female's working, the female's working full time, and the husband is working part time and caring for the kids at home, and vice versa, where the mom is part time and the dad is full time. And usually this is where the joint account really works out for them. And I have one family, one couple where the husband pays for everything and the money goes to the wife. He's told her, whatever you make is yours. Everything else, I want to be the one to pay for everything. So the mortgage, the utility bills, childcare, like everything he wants to take care of. And then whatever she's making, she gets to bank in her own banking account. And they do have separate accounts as well. So this is like it can be different. It's not fixed. And it can change with changing situations, right? So I think it's important that these things be discussed and to keep a open mind to think outside the box.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I would always recommend to couples when they're trying to figure out what path is best for them is finding one that the money's not controlled.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least everybody has a percentage of the money that's not controlled. Is the biggest recommendation. So how that works, you'll have to figure out yourself. Different methods. Tan just brought up one where they figured it out. Other ones that I've recommended and heard of is where you take all the money, you put it into an account of the bills. So if the total money that came in, if one person earned $3,000, the other person earned $1,000 that month, you'd put it all in for $4,000 total for the household. Then if bills are, let's say, $2,000, then $2,000 comes out of that lump sum, and then the rest gets split. So then $1,000 goes to each partner that they get for their own funds. So that kind of basic idea of everything goes together, then you split out what the excess is so that you both have your funds. Mm-hmm. Another way I've also heard of it being done is where it was decided on a certain exact amount was the amount that both got. So like the example I just gave, instead of saying, hey, let's split the 2,000 that's left over, they would just agreed $500 every month would go into our own accounts. So we both get 500. Everything else goes to bills, to savings, to investments, things like that. So both get an allowance out of the lump sum. I've been told that some people, when, someone's making a lot less and someone's making a lot more, where they only get to keep a little bit out of theirs because they're making less, and the other person making more gets to keep a lot more of the money because they're making more. I'd always caution doing this way because it can start building resentment and not feeling good. Just because one person doesn't have the job that pays more, they're still working normally same or close to the same amount of hours. And now it's almost like they're getting punished just because they don't have the same salary.
Mhm.
And so that can not feel good. And you want to be careful that if both of you agree to it, cool. But if you don't, you might want to look at how do we balance it a little bit better.
Right. And I've had this other example, which I think is one I advise against, where you have one partner who's bringing in all the money, single income household, but the other partner is responsible for having access to the joint account and paying all the bills and controlling the money, which, usually I hear individuals come into therapy and says, he might bring in the money, but I'm controlling it and I'm responsible to make sure all these bills are paid and on time. And I'm the one stressing when we get late bills and we get, payments that aren't being made. And so it's really interesting seeing the downfall of this method where it's like, okay, I make the money, I give you the check, and you make sure everything gets paid. And problems arise when money is getting spent, but this person who's making the money isn't really aware of like the balance in the account and falling behind on payments or not making enough, right? So like you may not know that you're bringing in not enough of what's needing to go out, but you think you are, so fights happen or there's miscommunication in what's being paid and what's being covered. I hear couples fight about like, so why didn't this payment get paid? I'm giving you the checks. So I don't think this is a good method and I advise against it.
Yeah. I think overall, the big arching message here when you're looking at how do you set up finances if you're going into a relationship, or what do you do about it if you're having fights right now about finances, is how do you find a method that you both agree on, that nobody's controlling 100% of the money, right? That there's a balanced approach to both of you having your own pocket of money that you agreed on, that you have autonomy to, that you can spend the way you want to. But finding that balanced approach, moving away from control, normally is going to make it so money problems go a lot smoother.
I think clear communication, even having clarity on like, well, how much debt I'm bringing into this relationship and am I responsible for that debt? Or are we both responsible for that debt? I had one couple where the partner decided to, because he had the funds to clear out $20,000 of the credit card debt, and he was resentful about that their whole marriage. And so it's like just really being clear on expectations, on financially, where do we want to be? Where's the shared goals? Some couples really like investing money. So one partner might really say want a lower allowance so that money can be invested, and the other partner may not agree. So it's really trying to find that middle ground and compromise because we might not all think the same about money.
You said something there about paying off the loans. I think it'd be really important when you're talking about something like that and how to use finances is to always make sure that you truly feel good and agree to it. Otherwise, don't.
Hmm.
You would want to at least take time to think about it a little further, weigh pros and cons, but don't do something that you're going to regret later. That's such a big decision. Each of you need to be responsible for your finances, especially if you're going to be looking at your own individual stuff. So important to balance, identify who's responsible for what, try to remove control, and look for a way to partner around money versus making it a fighting point.
Well, hopefully you guys got something out of today's discussion around something that's not very sexy: money, finances.
Well, you said it was sexy.
I said, for me, I can't speak for everyone. I said it's only sexy when there's autonomy, a sense of security, clear communication. That's only when I feel it's sexy. But if you take all that away, I don't think it's very sexy.
And if you're ever interested in our couples course, feel free to get to it at www.avidcounseling.org.